Welcome to the Right Take Podcast, news, ideas, and conversations at the intersection of politics and culture, a project of the David Horowitz Freedom Center. I will be your host, Mark Tapson. Greetings and welcome again to the Right Take Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Tapson. Thanks for joining me here at the intersection of politics and culture. Let me get right into things by posing a question. If I were to ask people to name the president they consider to be the most dangerous in history, the most dangerous United States president in history, there's no doubt in my mind that progressives would name Donald Trump, because the mere mention of his name sends them into fits of profanity like Tourette's syndrome sufferers. He is quote-unquote literally Hitler, quote-unquote the most serious threat to democracy since, well, the previous Republican president. He is Caligula, Mussolini, and the Antichrist all rolled into one. But in fact, when Trump was in office, our enemies knew not to mess with him. They knew not to mess with America. He projected American strength. He put America first. His rallying cry was "Make America Great Again." He kept us out of war. Our presumed allies in Europe, like European Union globalists, didn't like him precisely because he put America first, instead of surrendering our autonomy to globalist bureaucrats. Our real allies, like Israel, knew that Trump could be counted on to be in their corner. Now, conservatives would probably answer Jimmy Carter, Barack Obama, and under ordinary circumstances, I'd agree that those were reasonable choices. But we don't live under ordinary circumstances anymore. We live under the radical regime of Joe Biden. I'm not going to list the reasons why Joe Biden clearly qualifies as the most dangerous president in history, because I'm going to let my forthcoming guest get into that. He actually has a brand new book about that very topic. But I will add one reason that my guest wasn't able to address in the book, because it refers to an incident that came on the heels of the book's publication, and that is the recent Biden debacle of our prisoner exchange with Russia, which saw us trading our prisoner, Russian arms megadealer Viktor Bout, who wasn't even halfway through a 25-year sentence for conspiring terrorism against Americans, for women's basketball player Brittany Griner, who was sentenced a few months ago to 9 years in Russian prison for drug smuggling. We traded a man nicknamed the Merchant of Death for a celebrity athlete, in the process leaving behind a retired Marine named Paul Whelan, who was jailed in Russia in 2018 under purported espionage charges. Now, why does this make Biden an even more dangerous president than he has already proven himself to be? Well, let me just read a few reactions from Americans quoted in an article by Joshua Klein at Breitbart.com. Republican Representative Mike Waltz from Florida said, "Biden just delivered a major propaganda victory for Russian President Putin." A colonel in the National Guard, as well as a former White House and Pentagon policy advisor and the first Green Beret to be elected to Congress, Mike Waltz noted that, quote, "the officials in the Biden administration, dating back to the Obama years, have repeatedly made lopsided deals for hostages with authoritarians and terrorist groups dating back to giving the Taliban $5 in exchange for traitor Bo Bergdahl," he said, referring to the 5 high-risk Taliban commanders who were released by the Obama administration in exchange for kidnapped U.S. Army deserter Bergdahl back in 2014. Last year, the Taliban announced that all 5 of those released prisoners were now serving as top officials in the Taliban government. Mike Waltz also said that American prisoner Paul Whelan deserves better from leaders in Washington. Quote, "It's time this administration make drastic changes to its hostage policies that include raising the costs for those who dare try to illegally detain Americans," unquote. Senator Tom Cotton, also a Republican, warned that the deal would result in the deaths of innocents, as rogue states interpret this trade as open season to arrest Americans, claiming that, quote, "more Americans will be detained, in some cases unjustly so, in the future, because they realize that Joe Biden will give away the farm in return for any American citizen," unquote. Former DEA agent Tom Pasquarello, who originally helped catch Viktor Bout, also blasted this prisoner exchange. Quote, "I'm kind of in disbelief that someone with the potential to orchestrate arms deals that can kill Americans anywhere in the world would be traded for a prisoner. I think this sends a terrible message that the U.S. will negotiate, that the U.S. will make concessions, and that if an American is held overseas, there's always the potential that the U.S. will acquiesce to the demands of people like Putin and bail them out, unquote. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said, "There's no doubt today, not just Vladimir Putin, all the bad guys, the Iranians and others who hold Americans in detention, see that for people out there of notoriety, of celebrity, it is more likely they will be taken hostage today, and that is not good policy. The Trump administration was always very clear," Pompeo said. "We weren't going to trade bad guys for celebrities because it creates the wrong incentives for the bad guys. It's not good for American national security. It's not good for people who are traveling across the world," unquote. Now, I'm not sure I see a downside to our enemies kidnapping celebrities, since most of them seem to hate this country anyway. No, I'm just kidding. I don't want our enemies to target any Americans, including celebrities, although I do wish the celebrities who vow to leave the United States whenever a Republican is elected president would actually honor that commitment. Anyway, this is yet another way in which Joe Biden and the ideologues behind the scenes pulling his strings have put Americans at risk, at home and abroad. And to talk more about that, I have a very special guest today, so please stay with us, and while I bring him on, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss any of the great conversations we are having here at the intersection of politics and culture. My guest today at the Right Take podcast is a very popular speaker and commentator. I've seen him speak in person many times. He's frequently in the media, such as at Fox News. He's the author also of several best-selling books, such as Retaking America, Green Card Warrior, Trump and Churchill, and his latest, The Most Dangerous President in History. And I think you can probably guess to whom he is referring there. He also happens to have been a friend of mine for years. He's originally from Australia, as is my wife, but now he is a passionately proud American citizen, as is my wife. Nick Adams, welcome to the Right Take podcast.
Mark, it's a pleasure to join you.
Before we dive into your new book, I want to make sure that we talk about your nonprofit organization, FLAG, F-L-A-G, the Foundation for Liberty and American Greatness. Tell us what you do there.
Mark, FLAG is one of the fastest growing nonprofit organizations in the United States of America. I began it the very first day that I immigrated to the USA on the 29th of July, 2016. FLAG is about promoting the teaching of civics and the American dream to K-12 students. We do it through classroom visits. We do it through creating kid-friendly versions of all of the founding documents, the Constitution, the Declaration, the Federalist Papers. We also do it by teaching teachers how to teach civics the way that it was taught in the past. We are all about making sure that every young American knows what it means to be an American and that they have the confidence to defend Americanism in all forms. So we've had a lot of success. Our resources are used by more than 1.37 million public school students all across the country. We have a presence in all 50 states. We have just gone from strength to strength. Obviously, it is a much needed mission to be ensuring that young people know what it really means to be an American. And we have not passed on, I think, in several generations, what it does mean to be an American, the limited government dimension, the moral dimension. And that's in large part, I think, Mark, why the United States of America is not fulfilling her potential. And so as somebody that's come from the outside, as somebody that always loved the United States, I came over here, and I don't want American children just being lukewarm about their country. I want them to be red, piping, burning hot. I want them to realize that the day that they were born here is the day that they won the lottery of life, that they got this amazing, incredible, unparalleled head start on anyone and everyone everywhere else. And I want them to know that this is the exception to the rule. What we have here in the United States is the exception, and it's not a guarantee that it's always going to stay that way. What's guaranteed is if we work as hard as we can, then we can keep it the way that it is. But right now, we're really struggling.
That is fantastic. I'm a strong believer that education is the key today. We have to rescue the younger generations from the grip of far left indoctrination. And you're absolutely right. A focus on civics in schools for many years now has been notoriously absent. So what you are doing is vital to our country's future. You have some pretty notable names on the flag board too, don't you? Figures like Colonel Allen West, Dennis Prager, Pete Hegseth. So you got some serious backing in your corner on this nonprofit.
Look, when I first came to the United States, Mark, I wanted to really line up an A team of people. Many of these men were mentors of mine before I came to the United States. Obviously, before I immigrated, I spent a lot of time here in America, and I knew that these men were patriotic. They were America first. They had a lot of experience. They had significant platforms, and so I've been very blessed to have their assistance, particularly in the beginning, to build FLAG to the organization that it is now. We have national headquarters in Tarpon Springs, Florida. We have a $2.4 million budget. So we've grown significantly. We continue to grow. And I think that this particular mission is just so important. And the work that we've done with K-12 students in the public schools is now being augmented by other projects. We have patrioticboycotts.com, which is a site that basically names and shames every single woke anti-American company that there is, and we provide alternatives for people to be able to go and do business with, because we don't want to keep funding these woke corporations and businesses. So we're starting to branch out into other areas. We've had a lot of success. Personally, me as the founder of FLAG, our social media following is quite incredible. We're reaching approximately 20 million Americans a month with all of our combined platforms. And I have built personally an audience, particularly mostly made up, a bit of a cult following, you might say, Mark, of young males between the ages of 15 and 30. And we're really trying to make masculinity great again in this country. I'm really trying to encourage men to be alpha males and to have the confidence and the boldness and the assertiveness that comes with traditional masculinity. Because, again, looking at the state of the country, I think one of the reasons that we are so weak at the moment is that men have been pilloried, they've been mocked, derided, traduced. You watch any show, you watch any movie, men are made out to just be idiots. And I think that for America to return to her full capacity and greatness potential, we need to make sure that the men become men again, because all that feminism has delivered, in my opinion, is angry women and feminine men.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Masculinity is a big issue that I cover and write about a lot. So yes, that's a major topic, and it's very important to recover some sense of traditional masculinity among American males today. God bless you for all that work, Nick. I didn't realize that you had expanded out in that direction, so that's great. Okay, about your new book from Post Hill Press, The Most Dangerous President in History. It's probably not a spoiler alert to say that you are referring to the divider-in-chief Joe Biden. I think it was hard for many conservatives to believe that a worse president than Barack Obama could come along. But Biden kind of proved us wrong, didn't he?
He sure did, Mark. He sure did. Look, the most difficult thing in writing this book, The Most Dangerous President in History, to be honest with you, was keeping it in a version or a size that wasn't encyclopedic. I mean, there is so much to write and say about the dangers of Joe Biden. You really don't even know where to begin. And the challenge was putting it in a format and in a form where people wouldn't take people 2 years to read. So That was the greatest challenge. But look, Joe Biden is the most dangerously radical president in history. Even the great leftist president Franklin Delano Roosevelt was able to unite the country. Biden is like a rudderless ship battered by political winds, Mark. He is exactly where his Marxist handlers want him to be, and that is in the White House and senile. Um, he's been dangerous, destructive, divisive, and incompetent. The Biden administration is dominated, of course, by left wing and global extremists. They make the decisions, they make the policies. Biden does not know what day it is. He's just a figurehead, rarely let loose in front of a microphone or camera. And when he is, of course, it is clear to see he has dementia, unable to string a sentence together. So Biden's, and I think the big point that I make in the book, Mark, and I think the big takeaway is that Biden's complete surrender to extreme left forces, and I guess this is where it makes him worse than Barack Obama. Biden's complete surrender to these extreme left-wing forces such as Black Lives Matter, Antifa, defund the police, and then, of course, you have his and his family's very close financial ties to China. All of those things, I believe, make him very dangerous to Western civilization and pose a threat on a scale and a level that is beyond any that we have seen of any of the 46 presidents so far.
I think you are tragically correct about all that. And you mentioned that Biden is dangerous not just because of his own leftist agenda, but also because of the people he has surrounded himself with, like the diversity hire Pete Buttigieg or the epically incompetent Kamala Harris. So it's not just Biden himself; it's his entire administration.
It certainly is. It's the people that he chose. It's the people that were chosen by other people behind the scenes pulling the strings. Every single one of these people, Mark, want to that are around and involved with Joe Biden. Every single one of them don't like the United States of America the way that it is. It's that simple, really, and we rarely hear people put it like that. But that's the reality. They don't like America the way that America is. They don't like the things about America that you and I and regular, everyday, ordinary Americans like about America. They want to transform the United States into something it's never been, something right now that it still isn't, into something that, quite frankly, I think it should never, ever become. We heard first of Barack Obama say about 10 years ago, more now, that he wanted to fundamentally transform the United States. The most recent terminology that the Biden people are using is to reset America. So they have a very clear idea of what they want the United States to become, and that is for it essentially to become another European country, to be toothless, to be mediocre, to be weak, to not be assertive, to not have the leadership role that the United States has always had. They want it to have those socialistic influences of free healthcare and no guns and all of the things that define and identify European nations and indeed Commonwealth nations like Australia and Canada and the United Kingdom, to a lesser extent, obviously, than Europe. But nevertheless, they are the kind of places that the left in America, that the Biden people want the United States of America to become. They want it to look like Australia. They want it to look like Canada. They don't want it to be the exception to the rule that we love about it, and that I'm trying to get everyday young Americans to realize and appreciate.
So, in that sense, from a conservative perspective, Biden and his administration seem incompetent, but they're actually very competent at what they want to do, which is tear this country down. Isn't that right?
Exactly. You've got Biden's personal incompetence because just looking at him and observing him, you can tell that he is a man that is not at all fit for the role that he is currently occupying. This is a man, Mark, that needs a cue card to instruct him where to sit, whose hand to shake, who to call on, where to walk off, when to walk off. So you've got Biden's personal incompetence, but that personal incompetence is used as a screen for the nefarious people behind Joe Biden who are remarkably competent in reshaping America and winning the ideological culture war that has been going on now for the last 60 years in the United States. Uh, like I say, I mean, these guys, their dream has come true, Mark. They have a president that's in the White House that's senile. So they don't need a person that necessarily comes with the baggage that they have publicly. And of course, Joe Biden's image that everyday Americans have of him is very different to the real image of Joe Biden. The media have been running a protection racket for Joe Biden for the last half a century, and they've carefully crafted this beautiful idea that this is a knockabout guy from Scranton, and he's a battler, and he's none of those things. And but he's a great person for them to have in the front, while all of these people behind that are not only nefarious, but they are politically clever and they are good at what they do. And so they've really found a great way, and that's why they're going to run him again. I mean, all of this talk that, oh, there's no way Joe Biden, I mean, they're going to wheel him out if they have to, Mark. This guy is going to run in 2024. There is no doubt in my mind. In fact, we recently heard news that he's even now changing the lineup of the different primary elections so that it doesn't begin in Iowa and New Hampshire, and now it's going to be starting in South Carolina, which is obviously his strongest primary election location. So he's definitely running, and they love this arrangement that they have where he's the guy out front, he's the lead, and they're able to do all of their stuff behind. And Joe Biden's never going to keep a check and balance on them because he's not capable of it. And it allows them to just go on and do whatever they like.
Now, as decrepit as he is mentally and physically, he may not even make it one way or another to the next election. If in that case, whom do you think they might try to run, or what do you think will happen if Biden is just literally incapable for one reason or another of even being propped up for the election?
It's a great question, Mark, and this is the problem that the Democrats have. The Democrats do not have a deep bench. They just don't. Kamala Harris, the vice president, is chronically unpopular, and she has proved herself to be inarticulate and just not a person that you would have in the role of vice president. And then all of the other people that you look at, I mean, perhaps on a traditional analysis of potential candidates and what have you, you might think that Pete Buttigieg probably has got more of the skills and I guess the image that could potentially be more popular in a general election. But I don't think that that's where the Democratic Party is. I think that if a free election was held really with the Democrats without the party placing their hand on the scale to favor one candidate, I think AOC would win. I mean, these are the kind of people that now that Bernie obviously is too old, these are the kind of people that would be winning elections and that the Democrats would be voting for, because the Democrat Party has gone so far to the left. And that's why they're always stuck with Joe Biden. So in the event that they don't go with Joe Biden, I can see some kind of battle emerging, or they can't go with Joe Biden. I predict that there'll be some kind of battle between Gavin Newsom and Pete Buttigieg, and I don't think Kamala is going to go quietly into the night, but I really don't see a path for her. So they don't have a deep bench. They're going to struggle. Biden really is their best bet because of that arrangement that I outlined earlier. Because he doesn't, it's much harder for Republicans to accuse the Democrats of going socialist when it's Joe Biden. It's going to be a lot easier for them to do it with other candidates that could step up.
Who do you think is behind Biden currently? The ones running the show, the ones pulling his strings. I think it tends to be people, really smart ideologues like Barack Obama and Valerie Jarrett and Susan Rice, people who are good at running things, and they don't have much of a media presence currently. In other words, it's almost like they're trying to lay low and be in the background.
As I was researching this book, Valerie Jarrett and Susan Rice, and obviously Barack Obama. But I don't think Barack Obama is involved on a daily level with it. I think that he's certainly involved, but he's more removed from it. But on a much more daily level, you've got Ron Klain, you've got Valerie Jarrett, you've got Susan Rice. These are the people that are behind the scenes, that are really creating all kinds of issues for the American people, because this is such a radical agenda. And in many ways, I think this is not only a continuation of the third term of Barack Obama, but it's even more sinister than that. This is their opportunity. I think a lot of these Obama people have regrets that they didn't go further when they had the opportunity. And this is essentially what Joe Biden's term now is allowing them to do.
Let's talk about a couple of the chapters in your book, a couple of points that you raise about reasons that you consider him the most dangerous president in history. First of all, you have a chapter on the disaster that is Biden's border policy. The left likes to paint anyone concerned about our wide open borders as racist and anti-immigration. You're a legal immigrant. My wife is a legal immigrant, so it's not that conservatives are anti-immigration. It's just that we think it's kind of a good idea to have a system in place for the vetting of people who want to come here, and reasonable restrictions or guidelines about the flow of the people that we let in. There isn't another country in the world that doesn't do that. But the left here doesn't seem to be satisfied with anything less than an unlimited number of potential Democrat voters flooding over the border, does it?
Look, the left are all about demographics. The left have got a much more acute knowledge and feel, Mark, for how to transform radically a country. And they realize that one of the key ways of doing that is changing the demographics of the country. These people that are coming in, the Democrats believe, are going to become future voters for them. The Democrats believe that it is the older white demographic of the United States that is the only bulwark that is stopping the left from being able to fully do what they want to do to the United States. And so that's what this open borders stuff is all about. It also fits in very well with their virtue signaling, that we're good people and we don't turn other people away, and these are people that are fleeing horrible places, and of course they use this is give us your poor, give us your weak, give us your masses. They're using the traditional idea of immigration to their advantage in a situation that is completely different to what they're referring to. Look, I'm a legal immigrant to the country, as you know. I'm now a naturalized U.S. citizen. Mark, it was torture for me to come to the United States. It took 4.5 years. It cost $50,000. There was even a period of time that I couldn't travel to the United States because of political interference. And the problem that we've got is that it's really, really hard for good people to come to the United States and really, really easy for bad people to come to the United States. And that's, I think, what the Democrats love about it. Because I think that they know legal immigrants, because I've never met a legal immigrant, Mark, that isn't absolutely bowled over in love with the United States. Have you? I mean, every yeah, every one of us, and you look at the Dinesh D'Souza's of the world, you look at Elon Musk, you look even at Arnold Schwarzenegger. He may not have our politics, but nevertheless, I mean, all of these guys, Stuart Varney on Fox Business, we are all we all wake up in the morning and want to kiss the soil, even years after we've moved here. We are that thankful and appreciative of the opportunities and just how incredible the United States of America is. And so legal immigrants, of course, the Democrats are not interested in, because legal immigrants will tend to will be more productive. They'll contribute a lot more. They're more likely to be Republicans. They're more likely to be conservative. So that's why they focus on this open border stuff. If you don't have a border, you don't have a country. Every country, I believe, Mark, has the right to determine who comes in and the circumstances under which they come.
Yep. And instead of policing our borders, the Department of Homeland Security has turned its attention to a domestic terror threat that the Biden administration is really worried about, and that's parents expressing their outrage at school boards about the indoctrination and sexualization of their children. You've got a chapter about that too, that aspect of the culture war. Talk a little bit about that if you could.
Mark, look, it's nuts. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, I can't even believe that we're talking about it. Obviously, we run into it a lot because of the work that Flag does. My staff run into this a lot. We're contacted all the time by parents that are aggrieved by what is going on at their child or grandchild's school. They are very upset about critical race theory. They're very upset about what's being taught to their children. They're upset about the way that the school operates. And yet when they speak out, they're labeled as a danger. They're labeled as a menace. And it is just incredible that we've come to this point in society where parents are not considered to be valuable to the discussion about students that are younger than 18. In what world this is even possible is quite amazing. But this is where we have come to. And so instead of focusing on real threats that we have in the world, whether that is radical Islam, whether that is, take your pick, there's so many. But instead of focusing on those, instead we're looking at targeting mums and dads, grandmums and granddads that are taking an interest, as they should, as is what every parent and grandparent that's good does. They're taking an interest in what their grandchild or child is being taught, and they're not allowed to. They're thrown out of school board meetings. They're being labelled by the government. There's letters being sent from Merrick Garland. So it's a really, really bad thing. I am heartened, I must say, Mark, by obviously the Virginia elections in 2021. I do think that this is a an issue that is likely to help Republicans, help conservatives. I don't think it's popular. So I think that the left might be giving us a rare opening in their efforts that are going so overboard in these K-12 situations.
Let's talk about another aspect of Biden's dangerous nature that you highlight in the book. It's one that I think is potentially the most serious threat, and that is his subversion of our military through wokeness and the mandating of vaccines and things like that. You have a great chapter about that. Can you talk about it briefly, about the subversion of our military?
When I grew up in Australia, Mark, I was taught that the United States of America is the most powerful military force in the world. And I was taught that even if every other country in the world got together, combined themselves, the US military would still be able to defeat them. Now, I don't know if that is still correct. I don't know if that is still true, but I was always had incredible admiration for the US military, and I still do. But I was in awe of this incredible. I mean, you think about how much the military has done for us, not just protecting us at home and abroad, but one of the things when I go into a school, I will ask students, I'll say to them, okay, who can tell me who invented these three things? The email, internet, and the GPS. And invariably students will stick up their hand and say Bill Gates or, someone. Occasionally they say Al Gore, and I'll say, well, you're close. He did invent climate change, but he didn't do email, internet, or the GPS. But so few Americans, even adult Americans, know that it was the United States military that created those things. And so the US military, for me, is such an unbelievable institution in what it has done, not just for the United States, but for the whole world. As an Australian, for the first 32 years of my life, I was able to sleep peacefully at home because in many ways, the United States of America has Australia's back. Indonesia doesn't like Australia. China doesn't like Australia. But one of the reasons that Australia is somewhat protected is that the United States of America is around. And there's the ANZUS Treaty and all of that kind of stuff. So then to go and see this General Mark Milley in a congressional hearing, being so woke, being a big pussycat, when a general should be a lion, it is just so jarring. And then you went from don't ask, don't tell a few years ago to now this transgender stuff, the lowering of physical requirements to appease the politically correct. The job of a military, first and foremost, is to win wars, protect people and win wars. And these guys are more interested now in virtue signaling. They're more interested in being woke. They're more interested in appealing to the elites in the media and everywhere else. And as soon as we stop being in the business of winning wars, Mark, guess what happens? We get in the business of losing wars. And so that's why it's so dangerous what Joe Biden is overseeing and what he's doing. There are so many great people that are in the United States military, and so this is always a difficult subject to broach publicly because you don't want to in any way minimize what they do because of these overlord generals that are just weak and woke. But sadly, that's what we've got, and I love the military under Ronald Reagan. I loved the military under George Bush. You love the military all the time, but under those presidents, under Trump, when the military's got lots of money and the military is promoted as a proud bastion of Americanism, I think that gives people a lot of comfort and a lot of security and a lot of pride. And that's what I'd like to see it go back to.
And one of the ways that Biden has endangered this country, you weren't able to cover in your book because it happened right after the publication of your book, and that is the recent prisoner exchange that we engaged in with Russia, in which we traded our prisoner, a Russian arms dealer known as the Merchant of Death, for a women's basketball player that they were holding on drug charges. What are your feelings about that recent incident?
Well, Mark, to put it mildly, it certainly isn't a fair and equitable exchange. That's for sure. We've got a guy who's called the Merchant of Death, and then we've got Brittany Griner, who is a black lesbian basketball player. And the only reason why I reference her color and her sexual orientation is that we know that this is the reason that she was elevated over a true hero, a U.S. Marine that is being held in Russia. And the really alarming thing that I've found, Mark, in the last couple of days, and of course I am referring to Paul Whelan, the incredible thing that I've heard over the last few days is that the Russians actually said, listen, you get to choose one or the other. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it would not surprise me, I'm sure it wouldn't surprise you, if given that choice, that is who Joe Biden and his administration chose. And again, growing up in Australia and loving the United States as a child, I mean, I've seen every movie from Black Hawk Down to Behind Enemy Lines. I mean, all of them. And the one of the central tenets of American culture, even beyond the military, has always been never leave a Marine behind. Never. And that's exactly what Joe Biden, I mean, this is the level of difference, the level of poison, the level of quite frankly, evilness that we're seeing from the Biden administration. We've gone from never leave a Marine behind to he's been there longer than Brittany Griner. We're not even. I'm speechless. I mean, it's beyond words. It really is. But it is a very clear indication of just how far we've sunk.
Mm-hmm. And the eyes of the world were upon us in that prisoner exchange. Both our allies and our enemies took note of where we stood on which prisoner we wanted and what we were willing to give up. So that I think that's going to become a serious threat in the future. Where do we go from here, Nick? How do we stop this most dangerous president? We have another 2 years of him, presumably, and possibly more after this coming election. So what can we do to put the brakes on?
Look, I think in the immediate, we have got to hope that the Republicans that are in Washington stop being so French and become a lot more traditionally American, and they have a spine that doesn't resemble a jellyfish, and that they really go out there and try and hold this guy to account. I think I'm a big fan, obviously, of going out on the attack. I think for too long, conservatives simply play defense. I want some offense, and I think part of that offense is going to be doing a investigation into Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's brother. It's going to be investigating what's going on in the border. It's going to be investigating how we left Afghanistan. I think if we can, I mean, we owe them at least 5 or 6 good investigations. And I know that a lot of people say, well, we need to only focus on the people of the country that are really suffering, and all of that's very true. But in the immediate circumstances, I think that we certainly, as much as we might not like to say it, politics is a game to a degree, and we really need to serve back to the Democrats what we've received for so long. And so I think that will put Joe Biden on the back foot for some time once those investigations start getting some momentum. I think that's going to be a way to kind of slow down the agenda. Let's see now, it's also recent news that Kristen Sinema has become an independent. That's going to make the Senate situation even more interesting. So there's a lot going on. I think for the Republicans, all eyes have to be on 2024. That's going to be our opportunity to get rid of Biden. It's not going to be easy. I do think that one of the mistakes that we've made is that we have underestimated Joe Biden. And again, it's very easy to do so, as as we've discussed and as I write in my book. But this is a guy that just had one of the best, if not the best, performance in a midterm election for a first-term president ever. So while it might not be Joe Biden, as you very astutely pointed out, Mark, that has the competence, there are certainly people around him that do. And so we've got to kind of stop being Joe Biden, he's such an idiot, I can't believe it, there's no way they can vote for him. I'm telling you, they voted for John Fetterman. They vote for people that either can't function, they vote for people that are too scared to debate. They've got a system in place with this early voting stuff that they've mastered. They've done it now in 2 elections and 2 runoffs in Georgia. They have the practice down pat, and we have to start changing the ways that we vote. We have to start we have to start adapting and adopting their tactics. It's the only way that we can do it. And so we've just got to focus on 2024. I'm still a Trump man. Obviously, I don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of years. A day is a long time in politics, let alone now. So December of 2022. So let's see what happens, but we certainly need somebody that's going to get in there and not just be a regular politician. We're going to need someone in there that is going to really, really shake up the place, just like Trump did. And we've got to be prepared. One of the things, Mark, that I hear when I travel all around the country, I'm in a different city almost every day, speaking and doing flags work and fundraising and all of that kind of stuff. People say, well, I want Trump, but I don't want the turmoil and the drama and everything like that. And the truth is, Mark, even though, I obviously try and couch it a lot more diplomatically when I'm with those people, the truth is, though, that if you want that kind of change, you have to undergo some suffering. It's just the way that it is. And to say that you want the end product without the work that is involved, that is a weak position. There is always pain involved in such a big undertaking like the one that any presidential candidate or president for the Republicans is going to have. So we've got to be prepared to have a little bit of pain and suffering to get what we need to get done.
Yeah, I think you're right that we're facing an uphill battle when you look at all the fronts that we're fighting in the culture war and then the election issues and political issues. I think it's going to be an uphill battle. And I hear a lot of conservatives say that they are pessimistic about our ability to win those battles, or at best they're guardedly optimistic. Now, I know you're a fighter and an optimist, but let me ask you, are you optimistic or pessimistic about taking on this battle and coming out on top?
Mark, there's a lot of reasons to be pessimistic. But in practicality, that's not how I choose to live my life personally. And that's not how I believe any American looking at this fight can afford to look at it. We have no choice but to be unfailingly optimistic. We have no choice but to be unfailingly fighting, because what choice is there? The rest of the world is too far gone. For the pages of the history books yet to be written are going to reflect the actions that we take today. Freedom is going to live or perish right here on American soil. So we have to fight, and we have to be optimistic, and we have to call on our history that shows, really, I mean, the good news is that we really do have history on our side. And whether it was Alexis de Tocqueville, whether it was Winston Churchill, so many people in our history have said that America always ends up doing the right thing. Winston Churchill famously said that America always does the right thing after exhausting every other option. Alexis de Tocqueville, in his sociological masterpiece, Democracy in America, he noted that the true genius of Americans lay in their ability to repair their faults. He noted the uncanny propensity of these people to recorrect a cultural trajectory. So that resilience, that boomerang spirit, to use an Australian term, is very real. I mean, we saw it in 2016. It is there. It is part of who we are. And I'm going to always be optimistic about America's future. And in large part, that's probably because America has always been a light for me in my life. This country embraced me more than the country of my birth. I've been able to go and do things here that I could never have done in Australia. I've had a level of success that just doesn't even really exist in Australia, particularly in the fields that I've achieved it. And so I'm always going to believe that America is going to come through. And here's the most important thing, Mark, perhaps to end this, is this. What I want every person listening to hear is this. Even with the undeniable, indisputable, and incontrovertible problems, challenges, and threats that the United States and America has, even today, even under Joe Biden, even with everything you and I have discussed over the last 40 minutes, this is still easily, unquestionably, the greatest country in the history of the world. There is still no better place to be born in, to live in, to work in, to start a business in, to grow a business in, to realize a dream. Period.
Well said, Nick. Bravo. That's the kind of spirit that we are going to need, that all American patriots are going to need in the coming days and years. Nick, where can people follow you?
Well, that's a good question. I am on just about every platform. Facebook.com, type in Nick Adams, author. You'll be able to find me very easily. I think it's facebook.com/Nick Adams in America. You can also follow me on Twitter at Nick Adams in USA. I'm also on Instagram at NickA1. And the websites are flagusa.org, flagusa.org. And my personal website is nickadamsusa.com. That's nickadamsusa.com.
Excellent. Again, listeners, the book is The Most Dangerous President in History. It's out now. It is a bracing shot of patriotic common sense, just like Nick himself. Nick Adams, thanks for coming to the Right Take podcast, my friend, and keep up the great work.
Mark, it's always a pleasure.
The Right Take with Mark Tapson is a project of the David Horowitz Freedom Center and Front Page Magazine. Unauthorized reproduction of this podcast without express written consent is prohibited.